Docker Swarm services. In this section, we'll learn how to use services with Docker Swarm. We'll start by learning how to add new services to a swarm. Next, we'll learn about advanced service options, including replication, secrets, and configurations. Then we'll learn about service discovery and using networks in a swarm. Next, we'll learn how to set constraints on services. After that, we'll learn how to stop and update services. Then we'll learn how to use rolling updates to update services with little to no downtime. Finally, we'll learn how to use traffic to proxy web services running on the swarm. Adding a service. In this video, we'll learn how to add a service to Docker Swarm. We'll start by learning about services and tasks. We'll then learn about the different types of modes that services can run as. Next, we'll learn how to start a service and how to publish a port. We'll then learn how to see which services are running. Finally, we'll learn how to use a volume with a service. In Docker Swarm, a service is the way to define what runs. If you want to run Nginx, WordPress, or MySQL on your swarm, you do it by creating a service. Services are also how you interact with applications running on the swarm. They specify any volumes and ports needed by the application and the number of tasks that should be run. A task is a container and the program that is going to run inside it. It is the primary scheduling unit used by Docker Swarm. When a service starts, one or more tasks are scheduled and run on a node in the swarm. The number and placement of the tasks depends on the number of replicas, constraints, node utilization, and node availability. The great thing about starting services on Swarm is that you generally don't have to worry about where tasks run. Swarm takes care of all of the details for you. Docker currently defines two types of services. The default is replicated. Replicated services are distributed around the cluster based on Swarm's scheduling algorithms and the number of replicas you define. The second type is global. Global services run one task on every node in the swarm. The only exception is that tasks are not started on nodes that have their availability set to pause or drain. Global services are useful for tasks that do monitoring or logging. Creating a service on Docker Swarm is very similar to starting a container with Docker Container Run. The command to start a service is Docker Service Create. Most of the command line flags that you would use with Docker Container Run are also used with Docker Service Create. Just like with Docker Container Run, Docker Service Create uses the -p flag to publish service ports. The port is opened on every node in the swarm, and the traffic is forwarded to the service. Each port can only be published by a single service in the swarm. For example, if you start an Nginx service that publishes port 80, you cannot later start a WordPress service that also publishes on port 80. In video 3.7, we'll learn how to use the traffic proxy to proxy multiple services running in the swarm. Let's start a Who Am I service. It runs a simple web service that prints out information about the running container. The -p flag tells Docker Swarm to publish port 8000 on the swarm and connect it to port 80 in the container. The --detach equal true flag means that we want to run this service in the background. This is almost always what you want when you are running services. The --name flag sets the name of the service to Who Am I. The service name will be used in other commands to interact with the service. If you don't specify a name, Docker will assign one for you. It's best to choose a name yourself so that you don't have to look for it later. Docker will create the service and start the task somewhere in the swarm. We'll see exactly where in a moment. If the image hasn't been downloaded, Docker will download it before starting the container. This is just like when you use Docker Container Run. Let's go ahead and connect to the service and see what we can see. In this example, we'll connect to Swarm 1 on port 8000. You can actually connect to port 8000 on any node in the swarm. We'll learn why that is in video 3.3. The host name, listed at the top of the output, is the host name of the container. In the previous demo, we started the Who Am I service, but where is it? Let's take a look and see what's running on the swarm. The command Docker Service ls will list the created services on the swarm. We have a single service running. You can see the name, mode, number of replicas, image, and published ports. Because we didn't specify a mode, the mode of replicated was used. The number of replicas is important. In this example, it shows the number of replicas as 1/1. That means that one task is running and that one task is expected. If you see that as 0/1, it means there was a problem with the service, as there are 0 tasks running and 1 is expected. It can also mean that Docker is still trying to start the service. It can take a while for images to download and for everything to initialize. We can see the details of a running service with the command Docker Service ps and the name of the service. You can see the name of each task. They are named for the service, in this case, Who Am I, and a dot followed by the task number. Since we only have one replica, there is only one task, named whoami.1. You can see that the task was started on Swarm 3. The desired state shows that this task is supposed to be running. and that it has been running for 15 minutes. If there was an error starting the task, it would be shown here as well. You can also print a list of all the tasks running on a specific node or list of nodes. Let's see what's running on Swarm 3. The only task running there is the whoami.1 task. We could repeat this with Swarm 2. As expected, there's nothing there. Docker node PS is useful if you are preparing to perform maintenance on a node. We already saw in the previous section how to drain running tasks off a node, but it's often helpful to know which services will be affected. It's good to know ahead of time if you're about to move a database that will take a few minutes to restart. Using volumes with services work almost exactly the same way as they do when using them with Docker Container Run. The --volume and -v flags that are often used with Docker Container Run are not available with Docker Service Create. But don't worry, services can use external volumes by using the --mount flag. This works just like using it with Docker Container Run, which we learned about in video 1.2. You can use bind mounts with the --mount flag to mount local files or directories on your node into the running container. Unlike the --volume flag, Docker will not create the path on the node. You will have to create that outside of Docker manually or with a configuration management tool. Let's see what it looks like to use an external volume with a Swarm service. First, we'll create a new volume. I'm using a Ceph RBD with the Rexray driver, just like we did back in video 1.2. The volume configuration is made available on every node in the swarm. We could run docker volume ls on any node and see the new test volume. Note that all this does is share the configuration. If a specific node cannot connect to the storage, you may not see a problem until a task is started on that node that is supposed to use the storage. Now that the volume is there, let's create a service that uses it. In this case, we'll create a BusyBox service. The --mount flag tells Docker how to use the volume, just like it did with Docker Container Run. The source option is the name of the volume that was specified with Docker volume create. The DST option says that we want the volume mounted as /test in the container. There's no easy way to exec into a service. We need to find where a container is running and use Docker container exec there. The task is running on Swarm 2. On Swarm 2, we can run docker container ls to find the specific container. We need the container ID or name to pass to Docker container exec. We don't need to get a shell in the container. All we need to do is run df. And there's our volume mounted at /test. In this video, we learned how to add a service to Docker Swarm. We started by learning about services and tasks. We then learned about the different types of modes that services can run as. Next, we learned how to start a service and how to publish a port. We then learned how to see which services are running. Finally, we learned how to use a volume with a service.